was driving back from my wife's grandmother's house on Christmas Day, 2008, and I think, I know we were listening to public radio and they were talking about energy prices and fuel was due to reach $4.50 that year, and I had this little epiphany. We lived in a mill town, that there's all this water, there's all this energy flowing through town every second of every day. And I think it took me maybe 3 hours. It's a 2-hour trip, and by hour 3 I had a Gmail account set up and already started researching why it was nobody was doing this. It just seemed idiotic to me. Why wouldn't you tap into a resource that's free, that's renewable, and it's actually sitting there, staring us in the face, that there's 5 dams in North Bennington, there's another dam, there's 2 more dams in Bennington, another one in Powell. Why is nobody doing this? So for me it became kind of researching why weren't we using these sites, and why we were transporting fuel halfway around the globe as opposed to using these sites. I originally started looking at Perrin Creek, which is much smaller. I think it's about 18% of the flow of the Balloon-Sac River, which is the site that we now have. And I'm going to kind of breeze through some pictures in a little bit, but to give you an idea of where this site is located, here's Bennington College, right up here. We're actually in this building here, and the site really is in the backyard of the college on the Balloon-Sac River, and it's a very unusual site because it has 2 dams that are parallel in the river, which has been a lot of fun for Brian to work on. It's unusual in a lot of ways, but from an environmental standpoint, you don't have the same types of issues that you would normally have to deal with. So my wife and I acquired the site, I think, in June of 2009. And began the process of trying to license it, which was a little bit interesting. It was an area where I kind of found that there was kind of a lack of law. There hadn't been a lot of law written on it. There hadn't been a lot of hydro done in about a quarter century. And so I started wondering why. I know that the first revision, or the first time an application process had ever been developed for hydro in the state of Vermont was December 15th, 2009. So on a state that was literally founded and powered 100% by hydro, it was 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, when we first got around to drafting some of this stuff. That seems to me a little bit obvious, because why wouldn't you have a way of applying for putting in this stuff? So the site, it's the Vermont paper mill, and I'm going to breeze through a few pictures just to give you an idea of a little bit about this. It's on the Balloon-Sac River, and the river forks right in this area, and it actually forms 3 separate streams because we have a tail race, and I'll blow this up in a second, our main channel, and then we have an emergency spillway, which is dry about 17% of the time and is actually kind of important for this project. Move this to kind of get a better idea. We ended up building a park on the property, kind of as a little side note, but you can kind of get a better idea of how the river flows in and splits around this island. The tissue mill has actually been, it's the oldest tissue mill in the state. Sorry, wrong way with that. It's the oldest tissue mill in the state. It actually predates the state, and the original is burned down, but from everything we can find, the state constitution was actually drafted on paper made here because it would have been the only paper mill at which you could have gotten paper at that time. What we're looking at here, just so you have a little bit of side information, is this is an 85-foot dam, which is the primary dam. Right here we have the turbine works, and actually the turbines would sit inside, and I'll show you a drawing a little bit of what that looks like. The intake is over here on the side. We have a brick building dating back to about 1887, which would have been when this structure was just used for mechanical power, would have been slightly different. This was rebuilt, the concrete, all the cast reinforced concrete was built in about 1907, and that's when they put in the hydroelectric facility that's there right now, which went offline around 1957, 1958. And they actually only ever used half, there's 2 turbines up there, and they actually only ever used half of the capacity for the site. This is looking upstream. It's a pretty beautiful spot, and that's one thing that we really liked about it, is that we actually want to turn this into living space. So we want it to remain beautiful. This is the paper mill covered bridge. Looking upstream, just trying to give you guys kind of a feel. This is the emergency spillway that I talked about. It's the second dam that's parallel to the river. And again, this is looking upstream at the primary dam. This is a shot of the intakes. So what this thing looks like once you try to build it is, here's where your dam is sitting, and these are your intakes, and then inside of this big concrete structure that you saw are turbines that allow water to drop through and into the tail race, is the typical design. So what I began doing is to try to figure out how we could license this. And there wasn't a ton of there aren't a ton of people who do this in the area, and I think that was probably the biggest challenge that we had, and Brian can certainly attest to that. Finding people who are qualified, who can direct you, huge problem. We ended up going through a couple of different people on the engineering end, on the hydrology end, and trying to come up with a plan that we could present to the state that was a good plan and that would get this licensed. And one of the things that we started to talk about, people talk about hydroelectric sites as having the goal being there being no quantifiable detriment to the site. You're not decreasing the dissolved oxygen. You're not increasing or decreasing the temperature, and you're taking care of the stream habitat. And one of the things I started learning as I was talking to Brian and a lot of other people is, why stop there? Why not try to do a site that actually can improve the water quality? Is there a way to improve the fish habitat? Is there a way to improve any of these things? And through a lot of good and frustrating conversation with the state, we actually came out with something that I think meets that criteria. We've actually been able to do something that I think quantifiably improves the water quality, because we're able to control, using some of the computer controls now, we can control the ponding levels and all that. We can keep the floodplains from flooding too much. We can preserve the wetlands, but we can also incorporate some of the things that Brian wanted to see and take the emergency spillway, which is an ephemeral river right now, and we can try to turn that into a permanent river. We can have water flow over that all the time. That's a really, really strong fishery. It's 400, it drops, I think, 17 feet over a 400-foot span. It's all natural bedrock, and it's a nice area for migration both up and downstream. So where we are now with this project, after I think coming up on 3.5 years that we've really been working on it, we've come up with a really good design, working with the state, working with now some very qualified designers. We presented it to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and they're reviewing it, and I'm trying to figure out what their timeline is, which is always fun. There's a whole bunch of working parts to this. Our certificate of public good actually gets filed. I signed off on that in between things today, so that gets filed tomorrow. And then we're working on a 404, which allows us to work. We go through the Army Corps of Engineers, and we're allowed to work in the waterway. That should go in Friday of this week. So we're at a point where sometime, hopefully this summer, fall, we'll see, it's kind of up to FERC at this point in time, we should have all the licensing required to begin to rebuild this site. And that's kind of where we are right now.